Thanks for watching this episode of A Very Tall Man. Now, I suspect you may know my next guest. If you've watched the 700 Club, then you'll recognise him. His name, Gordon Robertson. He's the CEO of CBN, one of the hosts of the 700 Club, and the producer and host of numerous documentaries. Now, what is exciting is that this program is being taped at the CBN studios in Virginia Beach in the States, far away from the normal studios in little old New Zealand. The good news is that they speak English here. Well, maybe not as we know it, but let's say hello. We love the 700 Club and welcome to my program, even though it's in your studios.
It's good to be with you. It's
Gordon,
a great honour.
New Zealand is so far away. What do you know about New Zealand and Australia?
I know that The Lord of the Rings was shot there, so it's very, very beautiful. I know that. And I know Christchurch just went through some really bad earthquakes, and whole parts of it have been condemned. So you've seen your fair share of trouble recently.
What you may not know, however, is that the 700 Club is very well received, and we get a number of people who write to us and tell us that it's made a significant change to their lives. When you're recording it in America, do you ever sort of consciously think this program is going all around the world?
I grew up with the 700 Club, so one of my earliest memories was being on a trip to Asia. I was in college, I was 20 years old, and I went to Japan, and I actually thought in my head, well, I can get away from Dad, I can get away from the 700 Club. And I literally check into a hotel in Tokyo, and then I decided to turn on the TV in the hotel to see what was on Japanese TV. And I turned on the TV, and the channel was set to a channel carrying the 700 Club. And so here is my father in the hotel room speaking to me in Japanese. And I said, well, you can't get away from it. So I did grow up with the awareness that television can go anywhere. And as you create programs, people can dub them into other languages and distribute them around the world. And it's amazing when you get the reports back of what a tape show does, a rebroadcast does. The word doesn't ever return void. It is very powerful, and it can accomplish, even when you're not watching it live, it can accomplish the purpose for which God sends it.
It's funny you say that, because I was watching a program of yours that I found on YouTube, and you were praying for people, and you were praying for people at one point who had a sore right ankle. Now, you're not going to believe this, but as you said, I'm praying for someone who's got a sore right ankle. At that time, I had a sore left ankle, and I said, Gordon, the left ankle. And you, half a second later, said, and there's someone with the left ankle. It's like, wow.
Wow.
Yeah, quite amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing.
And you'd be pleased to know my ankle is a lot better.
Yeah.
I was talking to your dad on an earlier program of A Very Tall Man, and he says that there are millions of people who have given their lives to the Lord as a result of the program. That is just such a difficult thing to get your head around, isn't it? Millions.
Well, again, I live with it, and I put these surveys together. We have, you know, you're in television, you're in media, so you know the ratings reports and that kind of thing. We take that a level higher, where not just the ratings, but we go into countries and we take about 30, worldwide it can be 20 to 30,000 surveys. In an individual country, it can be 1,000 to 1,500 surveys. And they're face-to-face surveys, and we're trying to find out the program impact. And when you hear people spontaneously remember the show, and then say, yes, I prayed with the host to receive Jesus into my heart. And then, yes, it changed my behavior. I couldn't do the same things I used to do. I now go to church. When you get these surveys results back, it is absolutely mind-numbing, the number of people over a continuous period of time that are influenced by the broadcast. The surveys are showing 360 million viewers just this past year.
360 million.
Yeah, worldwide for all our programs. And one of the great things we've learned how to do is to train Christians in order to do Christian television in their own culture and their own language. So our biggest audiences now are Indonesia, India, Nigeria, and the Philippines.
When you began, when your dad began, and even when you became involved, did it cross your mind that it was going to become such a big deal around the world?
Growing up, no. The Dad started broadcasts in 1961. I was 3 years old. I remember being 5 years old and 2 years after the first broadcast, and we had our first television set. So Dad started CBN where we didn't have the money to buy a television set. We couldn't watch the channel in our own home. So age 5 was a big deal because we finally got a TV set. In 1967, Harold Bredesen had a word of prophecy over CBN that we have on the wall here, and we constantly go back to it to remind us that this is God's work. And you know, it was the dedication of a new building, and it was a new studio. Wasn't a particularly great studio. When the rain would come, we'd have to stop down production because the rain was too loud. It was a metal roof, and so it made too much noise, and we couldn't do the shows. But it was a wonderful word, where the days of your beginning seem small in your eyes, and they did. The first studio was a little shoebox, and here we're in this bigger facility. It had its problems, but it was a bigger facility. He said, where I'm taking you is today's date is going to seem small. And so we keep reminding ourselves that God is in the business of producing really big things. And he likes to start very small. He likes to start with tiny seeds, and he grows these big things from it. And you just stand back and are amazed what God can do if you just say yes.
Gordon, I think that you and I had a similar experience growing up. I spent a few years out building my testimony before I'd...
I like to joke I'm the black sheep son of Pat Robertson. Early on, it was prophesied over me that I would be the host of the 700 Club, and I said, nah. I said, no, God, you got the wrong guy, and went off to do my own thing.
So what happened?
I got arrested. By the Spirit, not by the police. A dear friend of ours, Reverend John Jimenez, who started Rock Church here in Virginia Beach, who I knew in 1967, he called me on the phone and said, I was a lawyer at the time, a partner in a Virginia law firm. He called me on the phone and said, I had a dream about you. I saw you going with me on a mission trip to India. At that point in my life, I was 35 years old. I had no interest in mission trips at all. I had married a Christian, which was the one good thing I did in my rebellion. You know, that was drilled into me. Whatever you do, don't marry a non-Christian. So I married a Christian. I didn't want to go on a mission trip. It was like, no, I'm practicing law. I'm doing my thing. And you know, God was not just in the back seat. I don't even think he was in the trunk of my car. It was, you know, it was like, you know, no, I'm not following him. And but there was something in John's voice and something about what I knew about John that when he said God had spoken to him, I took it very seriously. At the same time, my lawyer brain kicked in, and I said, all right, when are you going? And he said, it was Thursday afternoon. He said, I'm going Monday. And well, I got this. India, I need a visa. There's no way you're going to get a visa by Monday. And I said, okay, John, this is very flippantly. If you can get the visa, I'll go. I didn't know that that was part of the setup, that the fix was in, and that was part of his revelation and dream. He had already arranged for a visa expediting service to handle my visa at the Indian embassy. He already knew what I was going to say. And he said, okay, where's your passport? I'll have someone pick it up. And so someone came, picked up my passport. That night, it was on a plane to Washington, D.C. The next morning at 8 a.m., it was being presented to the Indian embassy. And the next afternoon, he calls me up, I have your visa.
So Monday morning?
It's Monday morning, I've given my word. I've got to honor my word. So Monday morning, I'm on the plane. And going to India, it was 1994, February 1994. At that point, you know, it was not just a long trip physically, but it was also a trip in time, where I'm going to a fairly remote part of India that still lives village life, and they still have water wells and hand crank water wells. And there I see a woman worshiping an idol And you can see these things in video, you can see them on YouTube, and but when you see it in person, it's completely different. John had put me up in front of 15,000 Hindus to preach my first sermon. And, you know, he knew where I was. He knew a lot about me. And, but he was following the direction that God had given him. And he was just saying yes to God. He wasn't looking at the outward appearance. And, you know, this was, you know, he was definitely taking a risk, but faith is spelled R-I-S-K. He had taken that risk, and before the encounter with a woman bowing down to an idol, I had recommitted my life to Jesus. But the experience of seeing that and seeing someone earnestly thinking a stone cow could answer a prayer just gripped me. And then I heard a voice, an audible voice behind my right ear. No one has ever told her. And it broke me. I couldn't live for me anymore.
I would imagine when your dad heard and your wife heard that you'd rededicate your life to the Lord, that must have been rejoicing because they would have been praying for you.
Oh, Dad was definitely praying, but I think Mom was the biggest prayer warrior in my life. A lot of people had given up on Gordon. But, you know, would I ever change? Would I ever go into ministry? And, you know, it's you know, when do you give up on the prodigal? And the answer is God never gives up. He's always watching, he's always waiting, and there's always hope.
Gordon, one of the things that's so meaningful about the 700 Club is that it's a two-way conversation. Television normally is one way, it's broadcast, right? But you guys not only broadcast, but you ask people to write in, to call in, to text in, email in. That's
one of the signatures of the program, has been from the beginning. It's always been an interactive two-way conversation that we proclaim the good news, we lead people in salvation, and then we invite them to call in with their prayer. It used to be part of the show that we would take prayer calls on air, live. We have gotten away from that just because of you don't know if you're going to get pranked, and it's a live show, and so you have to have guards for this. You know, guard on what content ends up on air. We do still take regular questions, and we read prayer requests on a regular basis.
Do you ever think what would have happened if you hadn't gone to India?
I don't like to think that way because I would have been very unhappy. You know, God has a plan and purpose for each one of us, and it's absolutely astounding that before he laid the foundation of the earth, this is what the Bible writes, Paul wrote this, before he even laid the foundation of the earth, he had a plan for you. He was thinking about you. So just imagine the 7 billion thoughts and 7 billion plans. But those plans are perfect for you. They will satisfy the desires of your heart. They will give you purpose. They will give you motivation. If I had continued practicing law, I don't know too many lawyers that actually like it. You know,
I just like the money.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's power, position, and money, and at the end of the day, that doesn't really satisfy. The number of testimonies we have on the 700 Club with people with money, a whole lot more money than I was making, a whole lot more power and influence than I had, are saying, at the end of the day, this is empty. This does not satisfy me. You know, the eternity that is in our hearts, St. Augustine talked about, you know, this divine emptiness, this hole that is within us, that we were made for a relationship with our Creator. And that is the one thing that will satisfy you.
Can we move from St. Augustine to St. Patrick? Because this is the year 2020. Mm-hmm. It's the year of the release of the movie I Am Patrick.
I Am Patrick.
Yeah. Now, you're quite involved in that. What is it all about, and why'd you do it?
A dear friend of mine gave me a copy of his confessions back when I was preaching in the villages of India. After this revelation, I become a missionary, and I move my family to the Philippines. I start going on these extended mission trips into India, Indonesia, China, Thailand, and I'm preaching in the villages of India. And this friend of mine hears the story and says, do you know the real story of St. Patrick? And I said, well, no. something we do March 17th, but I don't know the story. And so I got it. He sent me a copy. I got it, and it greatly inspired me. This really gripped my soul. Here's someone that God had spoken to and had called back to the very people who had enslaved him, called him to be a missionary. And it was of great encouragement, because it told me God still speaks today. Many people theologically say, well, God doesn't speak anymore, the canon is closed, there's no more revelation. Well, take a look at St. Patrick. Here he is 5 centuries after St. Paul, and he's having direct revelation from God, and it inspires him to become a missionary, to become a great evangelist, to become the patron saint of Ireland. And so it inspired me. God still speaks today. And here, 25 years after I first read his confession, to have the opportunity to shoot it in Ireland, to go to the exact locations, and to create a movie based entirely on his confession and his letter to Coroticus, to tell the story of St. Patrick in his own words, so that people get a better understanding of who he was as a man, why he was so radical for his time, and how we can still be as radical today, and we can listen to God today. Yeah, it's an exciting movie.
Gordon, a lot of people who watch the 700 Club, they become like more than fans, and you almost feel it's, for some of the older people in particular who can't get it, it becomes their church. Are you comfortable with that understanding, of course, that you would like people in the local gatherings, I would imagine?
Oh, we encourage people to go to church, and a regular part of our salvation message is you need to be water baptized. And I like to tell people, I've never seen a television baptize anyone. You need to be part of a fellowship. For people who are shut-ins, who literally physically can't get out, then yes, we're there for them. Dad regularly leads communion every Easter week. We do that as a part of the service. For some of our international broadcasts in restricted access countries where you can't go to church, we actually have broadcasts that are geared to how do you create a house church? How do you create a protected environment where you can fellowship together? So I'm aware of it. At the same time, I encourage people to go to church. But if we're the only church they're ever going to have, then amen to that. We'll do that. The whole goal of the show, though, is to introduce people to this relationship. To say, you can pray to Jesus. You can get an answer to that prayer. He will show up for you.
The importance of daily Bible study, the importance of a relationship with Christ. How is that for you? How important is it?
You have to read the Word every day. There's no substitute. You have to spend time with him today. As I've grown busy in ministry, I find setting aside that time to be very difficult. Early on in missions, I would tithe the day. I would spend 2.5 hours a day in prayer and in Bible study. And I think I grew more doing that than I'm growing today. It's just the busyness keeps shrinking that time. I'm being reminded, and this is yet another reminder, that maybe it might be good for Gordon to get back to that tithe, that the most important thing you can do every single day is to spend time with your Creator. He's got all the ideas. He's got all the answers. Don't be the Martha, so busy with preparing that you don't take time to be like Mary and just go sit at his feet.
Gordon, we are, however, very grateful that you took the time to speak to us on the program. God bless you. Thank you for what you do for millions of people around the world. God bless you.
God bless you more.
Thank you.